to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. A direct link for the group is in the YouTube description section. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018, and we have over 19,000 members. Come and give us a try sometime.
Welcome back. We continue my story of my time with the Krays. They were crazy days. My name is Albert Donoghue. I was chief growler and rent collector for Ronnie and Reggie right up to 1968, when we were all arrested by Nipper Reed and his Scotland Yard team. The Kray twins were dangerous people. Even one of the twins' own relatives didn't trust his own life in their hands. Young Ronnie Hart was one of thousands of EastEnders who claimed to be cousins of the twins, but he really was a cousin by blood. He and I partnered off together. This is something you quickly pick up being partners. If you get on with a guy, if you feel you can trust him, it's chemistry. It's like all those cop buddy movies you see. Professional criminals are just like cops in all sorts of ways. We both can live or die through our partner's common sense or stupidity, loyalty or treachery, his split-second reactions or his loss of nerve. So Ronnie Hart and I came to trust each other as partners. If I was going somewhere and I needed a driver, it would be Ronnie Hart rather than, say, Ronnie Bender that I wanted with me. This is how we were paired off and became a working team. So Ronnie and I would be sent to a pub to see so-and-so, and we'd go in there, and if we saw any opportunities to nip, if we could frighten the manager and take some dough, that was our money. We didn't take it back to the twins. We'd got it by our own efforts. But in those circumstances, you couldn't afford to trust anybody but your partner because the twins were shrewd. They weren't what you'd call intelligent, but they were naturally shrewd. They would slip in a spy who would then criticize Ronnie Kray in front of you, saying something like he's a fat bastard. Now, they're standing there at a bar wanting your reaction. So, if you say, yeah, you're right, he is a fat bastard, this agent provocateur would go straight back and report what you'd said to the twins. To avoid this, what you had to do was discipline the agent provocateur for daring to come up to you. You give him a roasting for having called Ronnie a fat bastard. Then he would tail it back to the twins and report that you were okay. You'd passed the loyalty test. So all the time you had to be on your toes. You had to be more wary of your own criminal kind than of the police. For safety's sake, me and Ronnie Hart developed a little code, because if the twins wanted you for what they called naughties, to do you over, they would never send a stranger to your house because you wouldn't come out. Or if you did come out, you were going to be tooled up, ready for the maniacs. So we knew that if the twins were going to send somebody to get you for naughties, they would send your own partner, because that's the only person you trust. So me and Ronnie worked out that if we were ever told to get each other, he would call me Jake, which was a nickname I got from somewhere. Then, if he said Jake, I knew it meant danger. I had another special name for him, so we would both know if something was wrong and we had to be on our dances. You could be up for naughties on the slightest pretext. Naughties meant you were to be reprimanded and disciplined for something they felt you had done wrong. That's why we needed this little code to forewarn each other. Then, if during the next few hours or days you were asked out for a drink by the twins, you knew it wouldn't be a drink but a beating, because you'd been a naughty boy. Suppose within the firm you had done something that upset the twins, or you might have overtrod your limits and nicked a bit of their business. Then they would decide, we want to have a word with him. Then they'd tell someone else to go and get you. If that happens, you're in for the severity of your punishment depending on what you've done. Or on Ronnie's mood, because he was a lunatic. There's no two ways about that. He would pop these very strong tranquilizers, like Smarties. Whether a man lived or died would depend entirely on his mood, or on whether he'd got in a running supply of Stematol from Doc Blasker. We knew that whatever Ronnie and Reggie were ready to do to us henchmen, they were bursting to do even worse to their enemies. But what about the police? Weren't they going to step in and impose law and order on gangland? Well, no, we all thought. Neither the local Old Bill nor Scotland Yard's finest were much of a factor in our calculations. No one on the firm believed the law would step in to avenge any of the Krays victims. We felt that in a large part of East London, the twins had become the law. They were the police force. If there was any justice going, it was in the gift of Ronnie and Reggie. We never thought that the real cops would come at the twins again. Libel settlement had made the entire Kray firm immune from investigation by the newspapers. And then we had a whisper that a Scotland Yard investigation, which had been running since the summer of 1964, had failed to persuade credible victims of our protection rackets to give hard evidence. Nor would any of the frontmen arrested over the twins' long-firm frauds name their ultimate bosses. Everyone was scared stiff to come out against Ronnie and Reggie because of the Boothby fiasco and the general feeling that they would always be free to kick your door down and your head in and put a bullet in you on the way out. Okay. In January 1965, they were charged with demanding money with menaces from Hugh McCowan, a homosexual aristocrat soon to inherit a baronetcy, who ran a club called The Hideaway in Soho. He had the courage to testify against them, but he had an embarrassing past. The supporting witness fell apart, and in March, Ronnie, Reggie and their co-defendant, Mad Teddy Smith, walked out of the Old Bailey in triumph and celebration. That taught EastEnders and even Westenders a lot, above all, that they should watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by. Twins themselves spread the message far and wide. How often did I hear them say, they can never nick us now. People just won't stand for it again. For the next 3 years they acted as if they were immune from prosecution, and they almost were, because surely no witnesses in their right minds would come forward again and risk getting murdered by these gangland untouchables. There's no doubt the detectives on the McCowan job had done their best to put the twins away. We knew that Inspector Nipper Reed almost pulled it off, and now he had a bee in his bonnet over their acquittal. Then we heard his squad had been disbanded. I can imagine the guffaws of all those bent cops who'd connived in the rise of the twins and other firms across London, as they saw this straight Johnny humiliated. He'd have the last laugh. But in 1965, that never looked remotely possible. Even if all Scotland Yard's detectives had been straight, they would have had a tough job nailing the Krays. But we knew a lot of coppers were bent, and the firm had plenty of dough to hand out in their direction. It was the only time, I think, the firm did anything sensible with its income. We drank most of it away. It was far more constructive to give some to the police, to Old Bill. So as well as paying underworld spies for information, the twins paid cops for information from the other side. Who they were targeting, who was going to get nicked, who'd had a good tickle and was sitting on a fat wad, but also, and most importantly, which of our underworld cronies might be informing on the twins themselves. may come as a surprise because the tradition is that the Krays so much intimidated the locals they didn't need to pay the police. That was nonsense. In our day, gangsters always needed to pay the police, and the twins paid on a regular basis. We didn't all sit around a table and say, "Okay, Sergeant, here's £300, what can you tell us?" It was done more discreetly. The firm used to go to a pub in Walthamstow in Hoe Street, but often me and Reggie would talk to the enemy before we went in. We'd peel off separately. We would walk down a line of parked cars. Then suddenly he'd say, "All right, walk on a bit." Then he would jump in a car, and I would walk up and down, while he'd be sitting with a copper doing the business. As the meet was so clandestine, and the copper was all alone, he could not have been talking to Reggie for any legitimate reason. When it was all over, Reggie would get out, and the copper would drive away. I hadn't overheard anything, but we'd go back to the pub, and Reggie would have a private discussion with Ronnie. Then they would both feed out what they wanted us to know. We knew it had all come from the copper, because it was like a weekly news bulletin straight from Scotland Yard, hot off the press. The trade went both ways. That's common sense. People say, "Oh, in the good old days nobody grasped," but that's rubbish because a CID man cannot exist without his informants. So if you give every CID man in the Metropolitan Police at least 2 informants, you've got a lot of informants buzzing round. For instance, we knew that anybody who got bail at that time had to be an informer. How else would they have got bail? They got bail for bodies, for shopping people to the cops. So you wouldn't have anything to do with them because the police would be expecting them to deliver a return favour, which might just be your body. As for Ronnie and Reggie, they have this image of being staunch, of never informing to the police. But this was a false image they created for themselves. There were several cases where people who had upset the twins for some reason, such as refusing to give them a share in a club, would suddenly be arrested. Now these were people who we couldn't just walk in on and slap because they wouldn't stand for it. But within a couple of weeks of spurning the Krays, they'd be busted by the police. There was no way you could prove a connection between the two events, but it only had to happen 2 or 3 times, and you knew it was going on. I personally never paid police officers. I didn't have to. As a member of the firm, I was safe under the blanket of whatever protection had been arranged by others. I couldn't stand in court and say, "They paid this particular copper money," because I didn't see the money change hands. It was just common knowledge that this was what we were in Walthamstow for. It would happen once a week. And as soon as we came away from that meet, Reggie would have fresh knowledge he couldn't have got anywhere else. Outwardly, of course, the twins kept up a fierce hostility towards the police. One night we all went up to the Gallipoli restaurant and nightclub, a Turkish gaff in the city of London. We'd finished our meal, and Ronnie and Ian Barry were already out sitting in the motor. I was still inside with Reggie, waiting while he was collecting his coat, when a guy came up the stairs, swearing and shouting at Reggie, whom he obviously recognized. I thought there was going to be the most awful punch-up, maybe even a manslaughter or 2, because this man was showing dreadful disrespect. He was drunk out of his skull, and then his mate came up from behind and grabbed him and said, "We're old Bill, he's off duty, leave him alone." It just must have got up this guy's nose to see us parading around, splashing out money, gained by criminal means. "We don't want to know," said the sober cop, and we all just backed off. The encounter was symbolic. The myth of the Krays, Krayology as it was later called in court, made even tough coppers think twice about ripping into the twins. The entire police force of London was backing off, and there'd be dead bodies all over the place before they got back on our case. Executive stress is what they call it nowadays. All we knew then was that Ronnie and Reggie kept on saying they'd had enough. So much decision-making every day. Who to rip off, who to extort, who to slap, who to do. Put on the list and plot to kill. Life's tough at the top in any field, but for the twins to retire, at just 32, we couldn't believe it. We didn't believe it because it wasn't true. They didn't really mean it, though by Christ we wish they did. Of the two people we were working for, one was a certifiable lunatic, and the other wasn't much better. So when they talked about going to live in a mansion in Suffolk, we did everything to encourage them. They had a friend called Jeff Allen who specialised in buying country houses, doing them up and selling them off at a fat profit. He had a beautiful place called Lavenham Hall, where while they were in this retirement mood, we met some people from the American publishers McGraw-Hill to discuss a deal for their official biography, which didn't come off. Later, Jeff Allen was nicked for setting fire to some properties that he couldn't shift. But at this time, he helped the twins buy a beautiful place called The Brooks in Bilderston, near Lavenham. There was also a lodge cottage and 8 acres of land with a little stream running through it, all theirs for a mere £12,500. They had to spend a bit more doing the place up, but they said it was the kind of home they had dreamed of owning ever since they had been evacuated nearby. Their idea was to live down at the Brooks while we carried on in the East End. They would still head the firm, but we were to run the business and just report to them at weekends. This sounded great, except I could never see the twins settling down in a dear little village like Bilderston, where the only night spot for miles was the local pub. Even so, we wanted this retirement scheme to go through because they were ruining a lot of activities from which we could all have made huge profits, if only they had left us to run them. For instance, they knew casinos could make a lot of money, so they bought Esmeralda's barn. Then they ruined the place, partly because they couldn't understand the odds in any form of gambling, partly because they had no patience. To get the best return from a casino, you have to hire straight front men, efficient croupiers and managers who are reasonably honest, who won't steal from the house, provided they're under strict scrutiny, but who also know the technicalities of the casino game. Little Tommy Cowley, who was on the brains side of the firm, understood the gaming racket perfectly and could have run the entire operation. If we had hired the right people to set up American dice tables at Esmeralda's barn, it would have been like printing money. But the twins could never work with straight people because their own greed would undo them. They would see a lump of money and they'd pull it out. They'd spoil a whole operation for a quick buck, rather than leave it ticking over nicely, making a steady and legitimate profit. They had acquired the barn for a mere £1,000, after their business brain, Leslie Payne, had intimidated the previous owner with veiled threats of Krayland violence if he refused to sell. Its smart Knightsbridge location in Wilton Place was perfect for the high-class punters who had been going there before the twins moved in. If only Ron and Reg had stayed away, it would have earned them a fortune. But instead, they behaved just like they did in Bethnal Green and the Mile End Road. They frightened the very people who were busting to gamble fortunes away. Big casino punters were perhaps the first people the twins had ever come across who would, in effect, throw huge sums at them, just for pleasure, without a beating or even the threat of it. At first, the twins took plenty from the barn because it had not yet lost its reputation. They could have pocketed £40,000 a year each if they had just left everything as it was. But within a year, the place was losing money because all the rich punters had decamped with the manager, Tony Mancini, to another casino that he set up in Mayfair. This Mancini was a very smooth army officer type, an absolute charmer who knew the casino business backwards and all the really good customers. He was his own man and wouldn't put up with any of Ronnie's nonsense. At the barn, Ronnie would act the generous host and just give the profits away. If he wanted to favour a punter, and this punter did not have to be homosexual, Ronnie would give him unlimited credit. It didn't matter if this guy lost £20,000, Ronnie would still be saying, give him some credit. It's down to me. When the guy ended the evening still a long way down and wrote out a cheque to settle his debts, it would only be days before that cheque bounced. Ronnie hadn't grasped that you should only give credit to people you know have the money to settle their debts. That way he ran Esmeralda's into the ground. The place crashed when it failed to pay its taxes. It went into liquidation, owing a vast sum of money. The twins had managed to turn a straight business, which was making a fortune, into a financial disaster. In our terms, this was one of the most criminal things they ever did. Another classic was the way Ronnie and Reggie blew the gaming machine business. In 1960, one-armed bandits had been made legal so suddenly that most of them had to be brought in from America through firms with mafia connections. Now if, as the Krays always fancied, they were well stuck in with the mafia, we might reasonably believe they could have had this one-armed bandit business to themselves. At least in the East End, where a lot of pubs and clubs would have found a Kray offer to install and service these machines impossible to refuse. But oh no. For the twins, this business didn't bring in a fast enough return. They were incapable of grasping that machines could have brought them a steady income over a long period. The tax was just £75 a year for one machine, but the take could be thousands. I found this out by accident when I walked up to the guy who emptied the machine at the Starlight. I just asked him, "You all right, mate? How's it going? How's the machine doing?" He looked at me a bit nervously and then he gave me a big bag of sixpences. I must have given the impression that I'd sussed he was up to something, so this was my payoff. Every time he came in after that, he gave me another big bag. That was a bonus for me, but he must have been stealing fortunes from all the machines on his round. Now, if the Kray firm had owned the machines, he wouldn't have dared steal because he would have got his head broken. At bottom, the twins' mentality was no better than this collector's. They only wanted quick money. Instead of operating a lucrative machine rental business within the law, they preferred to sell the machines and then frighten the new owners into making payoffs. They couldn't see that doing it near enough legitimately would earn you far more money than using criminal methods, and without any risk, aggro, or stress. Well, that's it for another one, guys. Hope you are enjoying them, and I'll see you next time in the next one.
Videos available for view. There's also thousands of images and